Our children she bore, churches that she raised.
Hey guys, Jay Steven here. So another really good question from one of my Patreon supporters, this time from Peter. Peter asks, did medieval Crusaders believe that killing infidels, killing Muslims, would gain them entry into heaven? Okay, so Peter, thanks so much for that question. And in fact, what prompted Peter's question was the scene in the movie Kingdom of Heaven, in which we see kind of this crazed preacher, who is shouting this out. He's saying, to kill an infidel is not a sin. It is the path to heaven. So that's a quote from the movie Kingdom of Heaven. So yeah, the question is was this the mentality that was motivating Crusaders? I actually discussed that in an extensive analysis of Kingdom of Heaven with Dr. Helena Schroeder and Paul Copenhagen. I'm going to link it below. But yeah, just to get more to this point of, did Crusaders believe that killing infidels, so killing non-Christians, killing their military opponents in combat, was that what gained them heaven? The answer to that question is going to be a very clear no from a historical perspective. So we have to look at what was actually going on with the theology behind crusading and some of the background to that as well. If we look at the First Crusade and Pope Urban II's proclamation of the First Crusade, and then the subsequent crusades that were organized later, all of them proclaimed by the Pope. The idea behind crusading was that it was penitential warfare. So you take a vow to go on crusade, and this is a sacred vow before God, right? And we can compare this to, say, the vows that a monk would take, or the vows that a pilgrim would take, or the penitential vows that someone would take when they confess their sin and vow to reform their life and to now follow Christ. Well, the idea behind crusading was that this is holy activity. This is penitential activity. So this is activity that is meritorious in God's eyes. So it's not just morally justifiable or good. It's actually spiritually meritorious. It has spiritual benefits to it. Now, why was this? Well, there's a very clear reason for why this was believed by medieval Crusaders and why the church was presenting this, and that was because the goals and the functions of crusading were beneficial to Christendom, and in keeping with God's plan as medieval Latin Christians saw it. So, for example, the conquest of the Holy Land, the idea of gaining the Holy Land for Christian control. Well, the idea behind that was that these holy sites in the Holy Land, like in Jerusalem, the city where Christ had died, and some of these various other holy sites associated with Christ's life, these were places that were made sacred by Christ's presence. And so that they demanded a certain amount of honor and deference. And the idea behind crusading was that by gaining control of these territories for Christian, so that Christians could govern these sites, they would be given their proper honor. Now, think back to Pope Urban II's speech at Clermont. One of the things he emphasizes is how the infidels, that is the Turks, the Saracens, have desecrated these holy sites. They've desecrated the holy places in Jerusalem. And so this is an evil that needs to be corrected by Christians. And to do this is going to require great cost and sacrifice for a warrior who's willing to take on this great challenge. Okay, and therein lies the key to why this was viewed as spiritually good and spiritually meritorious, because this is an individual Christian in community with a large army of Christians. So, but the key is that it's each individual crusader took this vow. So this is a Christian committing himself to doing something very difficult, this great difficult task that is beneficial toward Christendom and is winning honor for God. So this idea that by going through a difficult ordeal, by suffering, a Christian could do something good. This was something that was readily understood by medieval Christians, and this concept indeed came into play as the Crusades developed. Another important thing to think about is that the idea of going on crusade was the idea of sacrificing and doing something good for your fellow Christians. So, when Pope Urban II preached the First Crusade, one of the things he emphasized was how the Christians in the East and Christian pilgrims were being harmed by Saracens, by Turks. And so a Christian was doing a good thing by defending them. There's no greater love one has than to lay down your life for your brother. This is a very clear concept in Christianity. And this was at play in the Crusades. So there is another place within this activity, this crusading activity, that was this was the source of the goodness, the holiness of what was being done. We see a similar thing in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula. There was a lot of crusading activity there. Well, again, the idea was Christians are defeating these non-Christian armies, the Moors, and they are making this territory safe for the practice of Christianity. They are protecting Christians and doing something beneficial for Christendom. They're expanding the boundaries of the Christian kingdoms, and in a city like, say, for example, during the Second Crusade, the Portuguese conquered Lisbon. Okay, well, the idea is Lisbon before was under the command of infidels, where a false religion was being proclaimed and being elevated. But once it was captured by the Christians, by the Crusaders, now the true faith, Christ's name, is going to be proclaimed in this city. And Christians can now practice their faith there totally openly, totally freely. I think we have to keep in mind, too, that for medieval Christians, the path to heaven was created by Christ himself. Christ's sacrifice, his salvific activity, that is what actually saved the human soul. But by engaging in this penitential activity, in these holy works, a Christian was uniting himself to God and rejecting sin and embracing the good. Christians didn't think that killing infidels, that the thing that was spiritually meritorious was the actual killing of their enemies in battle on crusade. The Muslims. It was this activity of sacrifice and doing something for your fellow Christians. That was what actually earned merit in God's eyes. So we have quite a few examples of this. If you look at, for example, Bernard of Clairvaux, probably one of the clearest cases of Crusades theology is laid out by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux in his treatise on the Knights Templar, the New Knighthood. And he actually says in this treatise that it would be better if we didn't have to kill the Muslims in the Holy Land when we were engaged in this activity, but that this was the reality of it, because there's no way to end their tyrannical rule there other than through conquest, through military activity. So I think that's very noteworthy. This was how this was viewed. It wasn't like, the actual act of killing the enemy, that is what pleases God. No, the idea was that, yes, you may have to slay the enemy in the process of doing this good thing, but it is that act of doing something for your fellow Christians, of doing something to honor Holy Sepulchre and bring honor to the holy places. That is wherein lies the spiritual merit of crusading. And one final thing I want to add too, we have to remember that for a crusader to gain any kind of spiritual good through his act of crusading, he had to also renounce sin. Like, keep that in mind. Like, it wasn't like, you could be just the most egregious sinner and then go on crusade, and because you did that, that's some sort of get out of jail free card and you just get to go straight to heaven or something. That's not what medieval crusaders believed. And in fact, if we look at a lot of these speeches that the popes gave, for example, Pope Urban II's speech at Clermont, there is this emphasis on repentance, renouncing sin, giving up sin, changing one's life, and then going on this penitential mission of a crusade. So all that had to be in place. So you could, say you were a crusader all you want, and if you didn't change your life, then there was nothing gained from it. In fact, you could go on crusade and commit certain sins on crusade that would lead you to invalidate your entire undertaking. We see this, for example, during the Fourth Crusade. Pope Innocent III said that the sins committed by the Fourth Crusaders when they attacked Zara and then attacked Constantinople, that invalidated the entire crusade. So let's keep that in mind. So there you have it, just an answer to that question. So thanks very much for that question, Peter. Hope everyone's doing well. You'll find a link below to support me on Patreon if you would like to do that, and I will talk to you soon. I'd like to say thanks to my latest Patreon supporter, and that is Michael, who signed up for $1 monthly. Thanks so much, Michael.